Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Dawn Thompson, with my co host, Nicole Harlot. And today, it's just you and me, babe.
Yeah, just us.
We're going to just have a conversation. And we'd like to do more of these. You know, when we first started the podcast, it was just like, well, we need all these guests. But the reality is we have a lot to talk about just ourselves. And I mean, God knows every time we get on the phone.
I
Right?
know we should be like, oh, we should just record this.
I know. So I want people to know something, first of all. You and I have never met in person.
Nope.
We're co-hosts. I live in California. She lives in Jersey. We have fostered this relationship entirely through virtual connection, which
Yep.
I think is pretty
3,000.
cool. I think
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. I think, and neither one of us saw it coming, right?
No.
I was told that I should host a podcast for the last, you know, 15 years. And I was just like, I know that I'm not capable of doing all the things that need to happen in order to produce that part of it. It's like, oh, I can get on here and talk all day long, believe me. But the skill set to get all the marketing and organize the recording and like, no, that's not me. And I knew it wasn't. And so then, funny enough, Nicole was talking about starting a podcast and looking for guests. And I was like, I'd love to be a guest. And then we got on the phone and it was just like, oh, maybe we should just do this together. So, anyways, we're going to talk about some stuff today, though, that you need to know. And, um, when Nicole and I are first talking about, okay, like, so what are we going to talk about today? And I can tell you this thing I want to talk about every single time, all the time. And that is induction of labor or interventions in labor. Because I'm saying this to you as a pregnant person, like, I want you to hear me. You know what the definition of insanity is? Have you heard that phrase, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. That to me is what maternal health care is right now. And you, as a pregnant person, needs to desperately understand that you have to do something different than what everybody else is doing. Because 40%, right? 40% of births, almost 40%, not quite, but almost 40% of labors are ending in cesarean. And then there's some people who will be like, well, what's the big deal with cesarean? Cesareans are a big freaking deal.
I think that's the problem, right? Like our society downplays them so much to say, oh, it's a routine, surgery. It's a routine surgery that like, do you ever see those reels that like peel back all the layers in the cesareans? Like it's wild. Not for
It's
nothing. I think I said this on
7 layers.
yeah, on someone's episode, I can't remember, but like I had one surgery and it was like laparoscopic, so it was like little tiny incisions. And like me being a big baby myself, I will openly admit that like that was enough for me. Seeing those like little incisions, knowing what they did. I couldn't even imagine having a C-section scar. Now, mind you, I had 4 vaginal births and like I could watch babies come through the birth canal all day long and it doesn't
Right.
freeze me out, but like that's it, and I think that says something like that's natural, so it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have that reaction in my brain
Mm-hmm.
to say,
Yeah.
ooh, I can't, like, if someone slices their finger and it's like squirting blood, I literally get queasy. I can't talk about it. So I couldn't even
Yeah.
imagine myself with a C-section scar.
I know.
Um, because it
I
is
would
like it's that serious.
It is very, very serious. And the long-term impact is something that nobody ever talks about. But I really want to back up a little bit because it's not just about the risk of cesarean.
No.
That's not the whole thing, right? It is how many women also still wind up having a vaginal delivery, but they're traumatized by the experience because it was so awful, right? It was like, you know, the snowball effect of all the things, right? And I don't think that people can even prepare for when that happens. It's and then there are some people, there are a good percentage, probably another 20, 30% And unfortunately, we're not tracking this information, so there's no way to actually know. But some inductions are amazing. And they're like clockwork. You start the Pitocin and you just 6 hours, 10 hours later, you got a baby. Like, there's some that go really, really smoothly. But I think from an overall percentage, that's just not. The majority of people are either having cesareans or they're having a traumatic experience associated with it. And then what's worse is they leave the birth thinking that's just how it is.
Right.
That's how birth is.
I want to, before we get too deep into that, like, having a great induction still includes Pitocin in your system, includes IV fluid. So even if the birth went well, breastfeeding may become a challenge, right? We just had an awesome conversation last week with Jamie Zaki, who we talked about, just even healthy saline IV fluids can present breastfeeding challenges that, to another point that you made, Dawn, like, then the woman feels like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, and is miserable and like doesn't want to do it again, or worse, I feel like this is what happens a lot too, is like feels like their body failed them in some way. Oh, I needed I needed this intervention because my body wasn't good enough or wasn't doing the right thing. When
I ate too much. My baby was too big. I ate too much sugar. I ate too much junk food. Like all the things.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not throwing statistics out there. I was going to just make up a number, but like a little bit of the time, maybe that's true. And a lot of bit of the time has nothing to do with you. It's either incorrect scan information at late pregnancy, in late pregnancy, it is the doctor having alternative reasoning, not medical necessity for that intervention. It is so many other factors that have nothing to do with your body's ability to birth a baby.
Yes. And let's be clear, disclaimer here, there are some births that need to be induced.
100%.
Right? You've got preeclampsia, you should be getting induced, right? You've got super high blood pressure, hypertension, you should probably be getting induced. So, and there's other things too that are a little more rare, but those are the most common ones currently. But what's challenging is that women have to decipher that. How do they decipher it, right? And it's so hard to go against a medical professional.
It is.
Right? Like, and also what if I'm wrong? And I go against my medical provider and now something happens to my baby. Most women will choose to sacrifice their bodies over even the slightest risk, even if it's not true or accurate. Right?
Yeah, I do understand that, but also, like, what if you put your full trust in that person and then the same result happens? You know what I mean? Like, it sucks that we live in that world where we think that, like, putting the responsibility on someone else makes that outcome better.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's kind of the thing that we do, right? We just want someone else to be responsible. It's a common thing to have happen. But I think that, the biggest challenges is that Arrive trial came out, I think, 6 years ago now. The inductions were already an issue.
And now they're even more.
Now it's even greater. We started turning the tide when The Business of Being Born came out. I think it was probably 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't watched The Business of Being Born, please go watch this documentary. It's by Ricky Lake. Yeah, great. But we started seeing the tide turn, and more people were refusing induction of labor because that gave a very true picture of what maternity care looks like and why the business of being born maternity care has turned into a business. And so they are managing their business, they're managing their liabilities, they're managing all these things. And it doesn't really matter if it's what's best for you and us, right? You and me and our babies, right? And, you know, what they are betting on is that everyone's alive. That's the bar.
Which is the most awful bar in the whole world. Yes, like
Yeah.
the standard should not be survival.
Right.
Like that's quite frankly bullshit, right? Like
Yeah.
the fact birth, and I can only speak because I've had the experiences, not once, but multiple times. I've had a birth where I come out just gleaming with just internal power and feeling supported and like knowing like this feeling of accomplishment and this feeling of gratitude for my body and compassion for my body and understanding of my intuition, and like there's so many layers, right? And again, not just once, multiple times. And it breaks my heart to know that many, many, many women just feel like it's a burden, and it's oh, I got through it, right? And I want to get pregnant
Mhm.
again just because, I want another kid, but I don't want to deal with the entire experience again. But like
Yeah.
it's not an entire experience, like it's your life. It's a rite of passage. It's beautiful if we allow it to be. I want
Yeah.
to also make sure that we talk about like when we're talking about like responsibility on others, right? Like if you can really take the 9 months that it takes to birth, create a baby that's ready to be born and connect into your body. And we talked about this on some episodes of ways, so we won't get into that, but like really anchoring into your intuition, listening to your intuition. I just posted, I don't know when we're going to air this episode, but it is March 24th. And last week, I know, Dawn, you shared the story too. There was a woman in Wisconsin who went to the hospital and said, "Hey, I'm in excruciating pain. This, that, the other thing. We'll talk about, the details more." But she wasn't being listened to. And I'm not saying this is her fault at all, because she was doing the absolute right thing. But if we're not going to listen to our intuition, how do we expect other people to listen to us, right? So she
Mhm.
was listening to her intuition. She kept going back to the hospital and she was demanding something be done. And it took 3 freaking days for anyone to do a simple scan on her,
Right. An
36 weeks
ultrasound.
pregnant. 36 weeks pregnant. She was just totally ignored and condescended to, "Oh, it's just round ligament pain. It's just this. It's just that." Like, do a freaking scan. Anyway, spoiler alert, unfortunately, she lost the baby. By the time
Mhm.
they realized and listened to her, she had a uterine rupture. 3 days, baby is no longer here.
Bleeding
Totally,
internally.
yeah,
Right.
bleeding. I think, yeah, a couple liters in her body. Like,
Mhm.
luckily, she's still here to tell the story.
Right.
Like, that's what I got out. I'm like, this could have easily been
Her and the
both.
baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, my whole point to this is like, if we as women, as birthing people, can learn to listen to our intuition and then demand other people listen to us as well, whether it be I feel like something is wrong, or I'm not agreeing to that, both ways. When you have that certainty and that security in yourself to know that I am valid in what I'm feeling and how I am making this decision, then that whole responsibility thing is not even a issue.
Well, except for I think that that comes a lot easier not in your first kid.
Oh, 100%. My
Yeah.
second pregnancy was where I had to find all
Yeah.
of that.
Well, and I
And
mean, I think about our conversation with Caitlin too from Be Her Village, and she just said it wasn't until I had my second pregnancy that I became an active participant in my
yeah,
birth because of how horrific the first time was. Right? And like, and we've all been there. It was the exact same thing for me. When I had my first kid, I went to the doctor that my insurance company listed. I assumed he was going to tell me everything I needed to know about giving birth, and that I'd take the hospital childbirth education class, and I'd read what to expect when you're expecting, and like that would be it. And I remember when they covered the C-section part in my class, in the childbirth education class, I was like, oh, well, I'm not having a C-section, because you assume,
Right.
if you're not planning it, you don't have a reason to get a C-section, you're young, you're healthy, like, it just never occurred to me that shit could go sideways, and I could need to get a cesarean. And so I remember just thinking, like, as I was there going through labor, I did all the things wrong. I'm sorry, but wrong. I did it wrong. I went as soon as I started having contractions. I was like 1 to 2 centimeters when I got to the hospital. And then they like sent me to go walk, because they're like, it's a little too early, like go walk.
Yeah.
And I was just like, absolutely not. Like, I'll go walk, but you're not sending me home. You know what I mean? Like, and then of course, I went to the hospital in the middle of the night, and by the early morning, my labor had pretty much stopped.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I wasn't.
Hormone cycles. You're an
I
early
wasn't.
labor.
Yeah. The sun went up, the sun came up, the moon went down, and my contractions went away.
Yeah.
And I just immediately, I didn't know that was normal.
Right.
That childbirth education class never told me any of that.
I think that's a huge, huge component. Like, if you're listening to this right now and you start contracting, don't call your doctor.
Yes, totally. Just
call your doula, because
yes.
you're listening to this, so you obviously have a doula.
Well, maybe not. We can't make that assumption, but you want to hope so.
I
But
was being facetious.
I know, yes.
But call your person, talk it out, weigh the options. When you're in active labor, when that baby's really coming,
Right.
you won't be able to weigh the options. You'll freaking know, because you'll
Yes.
just not be in your normal brain.
1,000%. Yeah,
When you are in
1,000%.
early labor and you can still consciously think about things, or like, worry
Chit chat.
worry about the contractions that you're
If
having.
you're chit chatty, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not time.
if you can time the contractions on your own,
Yes.
then you're in early labor. And
You're
I
not
speak to
ready.
you because the 3 of my boys gave me days of early labor,
Me
over
too.
24 hours of early
Me
labor.
too.
My daughter, 2.5 hours from first real contraction to her being here. One little spout of what Dawn was saying, like overnight, early labor, and then it totally settled in the morning. And I'm like, oh, we got a couple days, except she decided no. But my boys, I mean, it was the same over and over. Like, I knew when it was starting, but then there was a lot of hours in between, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and luckily, my first birth wasn't traumatic. My first birth wasn't a C-section. I got pregnant after 14 months of actively trying to have a baby, and he was conceived through IUI. And I knew that I needed a doula because I was terrified of giving birth. And neither option at that point seemed like a good one, whether it was vaginal or a cesarean. I was like, this is gonna suck either way, and I don't know how I'm gonna get through it, and I need as much support as possible. So I hired doulas at 17 weeks because I needed someone to literally like just hold me. And they gave me so much educational information. They, really they knew the questions to ask me to even like figure. I didn't know what I wanted. They helped me figure that out, right? There were things I had no idea even happened, and they, gave me. I remember going through like flashcards. Like, do you want this? Is it the yes pile or the no pile? And I was like, I just remember specifically like the mirror. I was like, why would anyone put a mirror down there, like for you to see? That blew my mind you. And I joke around about this. So that was in the no pile. and I caught my last baby. So that there's
Right.
the spectrum of literally,
Knowledge and information.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember getting close to it, and my mom had a C-section, my sister had a C-section, my cousin had a C-section. Like everyone I knew that was close had a C-section. So to me, I was like, what what's the lesser of two evils? Like I don't know. Like at that point, I was just like, whatever happens, happens. Like I don't know what to even expect, right? And then I
Hmm.
had a vaginal birth, and it was medicated, and I went to the doctor. I'm sorry, my water leaked, and I called my doula, and she's like, well, you're having contractions. I'm like, no, but there's, like trickling coming down my leg. So I'm thinking my water broke, but it didn't. It was just leaking. Um, so I went to the hospital. I called my doctor. That was like afternoon wise. I called my doctor like 8 o'clock at night and just let them know, because in my head I was like, I don't want it to be 2 a.m. and then I have to like go to the hospital. Like, let me call now at like a reasonable hour. So I went there, they tested, they were like, no, your water didn't break. Just hang out for a little bit. Nothing really happened. They sent me home. Of course, as soon as I got home, because it was like 2 a.m., I started feeling contractions. So then I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, actually, I thought it was gas because it was back labor. So I was like, oh, okay, I have gas. Let me like take a gas X. I'll go back to sleep, whatever. John went back to sleep. I did not. I was just in this awful, what I thought was gas pains all night. I was in the bathroom. It was like 5 a.m. I was like, we need to go back to the hospital. This isn't gas. Like, finally figured it out. Went back to the hospital. Wasn't dilated much at all. I think it was like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. They were like, go home. I'm super lucky now, I could say this. At the time, I wanted to strangle someone for sending me home. But I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that they did, because I then, say I got home like noon that day. I definitely was in early labor. It was back labor. It was painful. It sucked, but it wasn't consistent. It wasn't baby coming, right?
Right.
All day. Then that night, I started losing my mucus plug, started like my bloody show. I was going to the bathroom a lot, just kind of like, I remember my mom gave me like a neck, like sock thing with the rice in it, like a heating pad, and I like would
Hmm.
just heat it up, put it on my back, and like shove my back into the rocker every contraction, like
Hmm.
counter pressure, not, but like
Yeah.
that's what I did all night long. Woke up the next morning and felt like a little nauseous. Wound up then going to the doctor's because I just had a doctor's appointment scheduled, and I was 4 centimeters. But that was a full 24, almost
Right.
36 hours. Then he sent me to the hospital. They broke my water, no Pitocin. I got an epidural. He was here by 7:30 that night.
Nice.
But I had doulas by my side through that whole, whether they were like on the phone or at the hospital or at my house, like it was them kind of gauging where I was, keeping me settled.
Now, not they weren't with you the first two times you went in the hospital, though, right?
No, the actually, yeah, so I was at the hospital 3 times total. They came the second time just to like see how things were. She was
Hmm.
there. So she's like, and then she like helped me do some walking around. She was doing some counter pressure because we were trying to get things going. And then once they
Hmm.
realized they weren't getting things going,
Yeah.
we left. She came back to my house and started like helping me like say, okay, this is what we could do here. And then she went home.
I
I
think this is the
also,
biggest mistake that people make is getting things going. Biggest mistake, trying to get things going.
yeah,
Like you're in early labor, trying
just
to get things going. You exhaust yourself. It's the thing that I say to
cycle.
first time parents all the time. Two biggest mistakes. They stay up all night the first night when they start getting contractions, when they very easily probably could have slept through them. And then they do all the things in early labor. They're trying to get things going. Like you can't do that. There's nothing that you're going to do
Right.
that's going to get it going. Just let it. It'll do its thing. And the only thing that you're doing in most cases is exhausting yourself. Now, if you are, you know, having a home birth and your midwife's like, we have to transfer care at 42 weeks, then you're doing all the things, right? You know, but if it's just like labor has started, I know it's difficult because you've been carrying this baby, everything hurts, back hurts, your feet hurt, like you can't sleep, you know, like all the things. And so then it's like, it's finally here, it's finally coming. Well, and it's starting to slow down. Like, no, don't slow down. Like, let's do, you know, and you're walking around the block and you're doing all these things and da da da. And like, I know you said that you felt lucky that the doctors sent you home.
Yeah.
I had the opposite experience, is they didn't send me home. And I wished they would have. I wished so much that they would have. Because by, you know, 8 a.m., doctor's coming in before office hours, and he's already like, all right, let's figure out how we're going to get this going. Let's figure out how we're going to get this going. We're going to have to intervene. We need to do Pitocin. Let's go ahead and break your water. Like when he came back at lunch, let's go ahead and break your water. All they were trying to do was make my body to go into labor, but it wasn't ready for labor. Who knows? I mean, knowing myself now after 4 labors, I labor for a long time. I have very long early labors.
Yeah.
I just do. I think my average is like 19 hours. And so...
Also, I just want to point out, I was 37 weeks. I've never made a due date. Yeah.
Okay.
So I never made a due date. So they were sending me home because they were like, this is just false labor. This isn't real. You're only 37 weeks. And I was like, okay, I get it.
I was like 41 something, like 41 and 3 years.
This is where like wording is so important, because they were like, this is false labor. This is prodromal labor, you know, whatever it was.
Whatever.
They used.
False labor was what they used to always say. But
it's just fucking felt real, and it hurt, and it was for me, I was like, how am I doing this for another 3 weeks? Right. How am I going to survive when I was in such pain? You know, again, first time, not expecting. It was in my back. It wasn't even like I've had, you know, now 4 births in. I know what, you know, real front labor versus back labor feels like. It was horrendous, and all I kept thinking of was, oh my God, I have weeks of this left if he comes at 40 weeks. So I just wanted some kind of like validation that like what I was feeling was real, and luckily again, like my doula provided that, because the doctors just were like, they were saying, we can induce you, you're only 37 weeks. And I remember I talked to my doula. I was like, I don't want to be induced. I just want someone to like validate that I'm in labor, you know? And then the next day going there back, they were like, oh, you're back here again. And then they like, you know, checked me, and they were like, oh yeah, you're actually in labor. And I'm like, well, yeah, you could have freaking listened yesterday. But
yeah, sorry about it.
Go back to listen to the mother, because I knew I was like, it may have not have been active labor, but like he was here 36 hours later. It wasn't 3 weeks, you know. And fast forward, like I said, I've never made a due date. My second was 38 and 6. My daughter was 39. She was my latest, like 39 weeks on the dot. And then I thought Dominic was going to be 40, like progressively, right? And he came at 37 and 3. Natural. Like I've never been induced. I've never.
You know what's interesting? All my boys, my 2 boys came right on time on their due dates, and both of my girls came at 41 and 6. Or like 41 and 6, 41 and 7, like right in there. Yeah. Like, so I went with both my girls, I went really long, and with both my boys right on time. They were both born, like one was born on their due date.
That's so cool.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I find that so interesting. I mean, and then that just goes to show you that though, you know,
how different.
Yeah, and maybe the gender does make a difference. I'd be so curious if they ever, you know, do anything, you know, research on that. But, you know, I think that I really wish that they would have sent me home, you know, when my first baby, because I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have had a cesarean otherwise, you know.
So my birth story, like personally at that point, was like, again, I was mad that they were sending me home. And then months later, months and months after I like really got into like this world, my doula and I were having a conversation, and she was like, you know, I never wanted to change your birth story. She's like, but them sending you home totally made the difference between what probably could have been, which was not a good story, and the really empowered birth that you did have.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
again, now knowing, like, having home births, knowing it's a process, knowing, like, made makes so much more sense. But like
Yeah.
at the time, when
Yeah.
I was just a first time mom and like didn't think I was going to be nose deep in the perinatal and maternal health space like I
Yeah.
am now, um, it felt like it felt frustrating at that point. Like no one was believing me. It wasn't like the fact that being in the hospital, being home, because now I know it doesn't matter where you are, right? Like,
Yeah.
but in my at that point, my safe space was, like many probably of you listening, was like being in the hospital, knowing that if the baby was coming, I was there, right?
Yeah.
Now I could tell you a lot of other
I,
opinions that I have about that, but I think that's where it was. It was like, no, I wanted to be in my safe space. So
well, I do want to be fair in saying, because I don't want to like make people think that like, oh, if you advocate for yourself, if you make all these decisions, if you do all of it right,
mm-hmm.
I put that in air quotes for those listening, um, then you're going to have the perfect birth and the perfect labor, and it won't be traumatic, because there's plenty of families who did choose home birth and still had a very, very challenging labor and birth. And it's like, it's not to say that you're just increasing your chances, right?
Right.
And, the number one reason for transfer for home birth, not emergency, it's for pain meds.
Yeah. Or like
There
maternal
has been,
exhaustion.
and I want to be, as a doula, I have been to over 300 births at some point over the years. And I have seen home birth that I would say there's a difference between hard work and torture. And I've seen women going through unmedicated birth where it's torture. And like, for me, unacceptable. I'm like, in those moments, I'm like, we're doing all the things. We're getting the epidural. We're going, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference. And if I'm being totally transparent, and this is hard for me because I'm an advocate, and I'm a huge advocate for home birth. I never imagined when I started this that I would ever be that. I thought it was bonkers. I thought it was unsafe. It was like, I thought all the things that most people think. But I have to be honest in saying that, like, I was a VBAC after 3 cesareans, right? My youngest was finally a vaginal birth, and I had attempted a vaginal home birth with my previous child, with my third, and wound up transferring. I had severe back labor, and we tried everything. We got the epidural. We tried everything. And eventually, I actually was one of those people whose cervix went backwards. I was at 8 centimeters for 6 hours, and like just there, and the baby just never came down to put pressure against my cervix, and so when we went in, and my midwife was like, maybe if we just get an epidural, it'll help relax, and da 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 da. So we tried that, nothing, and my cervix eventually my labor stopped practically after 2.5 days of labor. My labor, and 2 minutes apart, my labor just kind of stopped. It went down to like 15 to 20 minutes at a time. I was having contractions, and like at first they were like, well, we just need to rest. Then they checked me, and my cervix was 3 centimeters. Wow. Like, my midwife was like, I've heard of this. I've never actually seen it happen. Right. And so clearly there was something wrong. And when the doctor went in, he actually gasped. Thankfully, he was a good friend, and so I was very confident and comfortable with him. And he gasped and he goes, "Whoa!" And he goes, "I've never seen anything like that." He said, "Literally, your insides looked like a melted box of crayons. You had so much scar tissue, and the scar tissue was actually impeding into my uterus, which was why my baby couldn't go down.
Right. That makes
She
sense.
couldn't get in. She couldn't get into the pelvis." And so, fast forward 13 months later, I'm doing it again. And my doctor and my midwife both encouraged me to try it again because he's like, "Look, I cleaned out all the scar tissue. I think you won't have any trouble this time." And so I tried it again, and the excruciating back labor. And it didn't matter that I had gotten the baby into not posterior. My previous was posterior, but this one not posterior, but it didn't matter. Turns out I had an injury in my back and I didn't know. And well, I knew, but I didn't know that this was impacting my labors every time. And so it was excruciating pain. And it was, frankly, my labor with him was torturous. It wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. I didn't feel empowered, and I want to be honest about that because I'm still really supportive of midwifery. I'm really supportive of vaginal birth. I'm really supportive of home birth even. I don't know that it's for everyone because if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel all those things, then it's not going to go well. But I also don't want to pretend that it's all fucking rainbows and butterflies because it's not always.
No,
But,
I mean, I think birth in general, like, it's beautiful, but it's primal. And, like,
yes,
it's not, just because you have a gentle birth doesn't mean it's pain-free.
yes,
And, like, there's terminology that I think works in, like, the real world, and then, like, when you put it in birth, they think it's the same, but it's not. Like, I think
yeah,
gentle birth is, like, more supported birth, and
yes,
mother-led
yes.
birth, and patient-centered birth, and, like, things
Well,
like that where,
and that's, I mean, you're speaking to what I was going to say next, which is I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for the world because if I know that even though it was torturous, it was not smooth in any way, shape, or form, it was extraordinarily painful. And I kept saying, if I just only had to deal with the contractions in the front,
right, back labor is a different freaking story. Trust
I
me.
was,
Like I said, I
that
know.
was manageable. That was manageable. It hurt like hell, but it was manageable. But here's the thing. I would not have been supported the same way in a hospital birth. And I know that if I'd been in the hospital, I would not have probably had a vaginal delivery.
Right.
Right? And I still at least had a vaginal delivery, which was my goal. And I was so proud of that. But I just don't want to be, I just don't want to mislead people that like, it's hard. It's the fucking hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's also incredible.
Right. So I think we tend to blame Instagram a lot, right? I will literally sit there and, because of what we're into, like my whole feed is birth, breastfeeding, like all of the things, right? So you see these beautiful birth videos, these gentle, serene, baby coming out so slowly into the water, drifting
Hmm.
around. I freaking love that, right? I love it. So grateful for those people. However, and I really, really want to show my birth video with Dominic on Instagram, except I will get yelled at by all family members and my husband and all the things because it's like all of me, baby
Yes.
shooting out, right? So,
You
like,
know
there's
what
a
you
time
should
and place.
do is you should have badass mother birther do it.
Maybe.
So then it's not
Not me.
associated to
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So, But like I show my kids see it all the time, and they're funny. They're like, "Ma, I want to see the video of you and Dominic when you're screaming." Right? Like it's not silent, it's not serene. It was amazing. I caught him, like that was the goal. Like it was also after Jenna's birth, which like I mentioned was really quick. Like I got in that tub and I think like half hour if a half hour passed and she shot out of me. It
Yeah.
was not serene. It was like, she shot like the back. Like my midwife caught her from behind, right? Um but it wasn't caught on video. And I even said, I'm like, with Dominic, I really want to enjoy my time in the tub. I want to like have that gentle birth and really take the time to process, right? Well, I screwed myself because he kept me in that tub so long and all different, you could see in my birth pictures, I'm like this way and then I'm that way and I'm moving all these positions and I'm like, well, this worked with Jenna and Owen. Why isn't it working with him? And
Right.
finally they lifted my stomach and then literally I think a minute later, the next contraction, he came shooting out. But it was almost like,
I gotta plug my laptop in. Hold
okay,
on. Okay, sorry. It was about to die.
it's almost like I manifested it. Like he kept me in that tub for hours, hours. And I was like, screw these Instagram reels that make it look, so beautiful. And so, it
Yeah.
was absolutely beautiful. But like when the time came where I was like, it wasn't silent, it was "Rah!" like
Right.
roaring him out. And I wish there was more of that on Instagram because that's real. Like I said, like birth is wild, it's primal, it's primordial, like it's us in our bodies. It's so freaking cool. And again, I can sit here today and tell you this. I already told you on this podcast episode that 7 years ago when I had my first, I was like, you have to give me an IV. I don't want to look. I don't want to look. Like,
Right.
don't put the mirror down there. I want
Yeah.
nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
To the extreme, right? So like I'm totally an anomaly. I don't think everyone who has, a great birth their first time then turns into a birth advocate and, a postpartum advocate and all the things. And it really wasn't even my birth that put me into this world. It was my postpartum experience and dealing with
Mm.
OCD and anxiety postpartum. That's what drew me into this world. My
Hmm.
birth was just like, okay, cool, I did it, and then luckily, I say again, luckily now, because I had that postpartum experience, the next time I got pregnant, I really advocated for myself because I needed to have a different postpartum experience with my
Yeah.
second.
Right.
And what happened was that everything that, in the end in mind, right? Like Stephen Covey has a book like begin with the end in mind is one of his strategies for like life and business.
Hmm.
But that was my goal with that birth was, okay, everything I'm doing in pregnancy, everything I'm doing for my birth plan is going to make sure my postpartum is really supported and really gentle. And what
Hmm.
happened was like it then made my birth really, I was that active participant, like you said. And
Hmm.
in my pregnancy, I was the difficult child. I call myself the difficult child, which I hate referring to myself, but that's the analogy, right? Where like I was asking questions and I was like demanding certain things and I was moving providers if I didn't get what I wanted. Like I was throwing tantrums, like respectfully and as an adult and not
Yeah.
a 2-year old, but saying like, hey, this is unacceptable. I'm moving on. So,
Yeah. Well, I guess it's funny because we started out talking about induction of labor and then we ended up just sharing our birth stories. But, um, you know, if you haven't already, please, please, please go back. If you haven't listened to the Annette Feinberg episode about induction of labor and the Arrive trial, please, it's our most downloaded episode so far, I think, by quite a few.
yeah.
It's incredibly helpful in understanding because if your provider is starting to talk to you about inducing labor, you need to know a lot more than you do probably, and understand the risks and benefits. We're not here to tell you that you shouldn't get induced. We're here to just say, gather all the information so that you understand what your risks, benefits, and what the alternatives to inducing labor are. And making sure that you are always asking the BRAIN acronym. Look it up. BRAIN acronym. I think we have it in show notes, but we can put it in the show notes too.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like making sure that you're informed and you're making informed decisions, so that whatever decisions they are right for you in that moment, and you could feel good about them, and not that birth happened to you, but like you were actually the one, doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say our last, for me here, my last 4 clients that have been, well, they're not really clients. They've just been people I know in my life, but 5 of them, and all 5 of them in the last 2 weeks have given birth via cesarean because they were induced for whatever reason. Well, most of it was big baby, small baby. Both the 4 of them were induced for 2 of them for the baby was too big, and the other 2 where the baby was too small. And in all 4 of those cases, the babies came out normal sized. And it makes me sick. It makes me sick. We're making major medical decisions on ultrasound, which has been clearly found to be inaccurate, like by a lot. Not just a little bit, by a lot.
And again, like, I know I'm the extreme here, right? Like, I can vouch for that. I'm not everyone. But my last 2 births, I did not have a 3rd trimester ultrasound. I did not have a cervical check for, at all. I did not have really, like, anything. I just let it happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't care how, and mind you, my second was 9 pounds. So I had no idea how big, but they were both 7. They were actually, my last 2 were my 2 smallest babies, so the choice is yours always. The choice is yours. But for me, with not finding, there was no one could say anything, right? No one could say, oh, big baby, small baby, because there was no data for them to look at, right? And baby was just baby.
Right.
I wasn't having high blood pressure. My vitals were all good. My sugars were good. All the things. I won't get into the fact that I didn't even have a glucose test for the last 2.
Yeah.
Because I just declined it because I didn't need it. It was fine.
Right. You're like, I'm good.
I'm good. I was good. But, funny story. We'll end this on a funny story. My home birth midwife, and this is personal, so, like, you'll get a laugh out of it. My home birth midwife, after I gave birth, was checking down there. And she goes, oh, I didn't know you had a piercing. So, spoiler alert, I have a piercing down there. But more so, it was just this, like, aha moment that my midwife never even saw my vulva and vagina before the baby was born. She never did an internal. She never did a cervical check. Her fingers were never in me.
Right.
Until that baby was born.
Right.
Totally healthy mom, totally healthy baby.
Yeah.
And, like, just to show you, again, I'm the extreme, but, like, it's possible to not have fingers in you every hour at the hospital.
Yes.
And it's possible to not be so monitored. And again, disclaimer, if there's something wrong, if you're not feeling right, if you're having high blood pressure, if you're, feeling a little lightheaded because of sugar, levels and things like that, totally different story.
Yes.
So again,
well, let me just clarify this.
Yeah.
Birth is not a medical event until it becomes one, and it needs medical intervention.
Yeah.
but in most cases, we are causing the medical event.
Yes.
We're turning normal physiological process into a medical one, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's like there are births that turn into a medical event, and those should be treated like a medical event. But why treat everything like a medical event just in case, and then we're just screwing it all up?
That's where liability and,
Yeah, it's
the
like,
business of it comes into
yes,
play. And
exactly.
that's the unfortunate part. So I think, again, you don't have to go to the extreme of me where I'm like super anti-system. And once I realized how ridiculous it was, I'm like, unless I know I really need to step into that, like I'm not.
Yeah.
And I go,
Same.
that even with my children and like their illnesses
Same.
and stuff, like once you go that way, you just don't go back.
Well, and
But
I think, like, let's talk about that just a little bit. I mean, I know we need to wrap up,
it's
but
fine. We have 2 minutes.
I just think that is such a huge point, is that before I became a doula, I was so Western medicine. I was so just like, why would anyone do that without an epidural? Why would anyone not go to the hospital? And I meant that for everything. The way I fed my family, the way everything. And I bet you there are thousands of doulas out there that have the exact same story, and midwives even, but especially doulas, that come into this thinking maybe they had their own babies, they had all the interventions, they didn't, like whatever. They're not natural minded. I was not natural minded. I was not organic in any way. Like, I was type A, follow the rules, all these things. And my guess is that there are so many doulas out there that would say the same thing as me. And that is, you cannot step into this world and have the inside view of maternity care the way that we do, and start reading the research, start reading the medical guidelines. We're not just reading midwifery today, y'all. Like, we're not all crunchy. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how we start out. And even still, I'm very much a type A personality, But being in this world gives you a whole different view. And suddenly you go, holy mackerel. Like, what is this? Like, it's just, you just realize how absolutely dysfunctional it is and how much better it can be. And I mean, it changed me in ways. And my kids now, I think my 2 youngest, now, mind, I have 6 total, right? 4 that I gave birth to. My 2 youngest, big age gap between my first 4 and the last 2. My 2 youngest have they're 14 and 15, about to be 15 and 16. They have been to a medical provider 3 times their whole lives. They've been on antibiotics 1 time each. And it was because they just seriously needed it. Like, they got severe strep throat, and like, that's it. Everything else I treat at home. I treat with, like, natural remedies. And like, I never thought I would be that person.
No, me neither, honestly. I mean, even it was really until Owen's pregnancy that I started diving deep into it, right? Like I said, I mean, my whole postpartum journey, I'd say Dylan was around 18 months when I was like fully like healed from what I had gone through and like ready to share my story and ready to really dive in. And then I got pregnant when he was just about 2. When I got pregnant with Owen and started just really diving into the research, diving into all of the things. So I would say for the last, and quite frankly, it aligns with COVID, but I was pregnant in September 2019, started doing all of this research. Then COVID happened. He was born 2 weeks after lockdown, and just seeing how the world was and reacted and all of the things over then the next 2 years solidified everything that I was doing. And then by the time I got pregnant with Jenna, I was like, oh yeah, Jenna never even saw a pediatrician until she was 2 years old, and that's the only time
Hmm.
she's ever seen one. She's
Yeah.
just turned three. Just for like a hey, she's on record that
Right.
you know
Yeah.
that I treat her well.
Yeah.
But I don't need a doctor to tell me that. But I
Right.
think, what was for me too is the like specifically in the birth stuff, we can talk about just the medical world and illnesses and vaccines and all that fun stuff forever. But when terms of the like pregnancy, birth, postpartum, when I started having children, I have boys, and I want them to be there for their wives, their future wives, and my
Hmm.
daughter, like, I can't wait for her to get her period because it's going to be
Hmm.
such a different experience. She's going to understand her cyclical nature, and she's going to honor it, and she's not going to hate it and feel dirty by it and all the things. And then fast forward to birth, right? I have an 18-year-old half sister, and we were talking the other day, and she's like, Nicole, I can't wait because like when I have a baby, like when I get pregnant, well, she could wait, but like, when the time comes, like I want to have a home birth, and I know I have you, and I tell my friends that like you're so good with all of that stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that's awesome. Like that's what we need to do is change the next generation, right? Because
Yeah.
my boys have seen two home births. They were there
Yeah.
both times. They love
Right.
seeing, my pictures and my videos, and like they don't understand birth in a hospital. They don't understand like the typical like TV show birth where the water breaks and you panic and run to the
Right.
hospital. Like they know what it is because they've witnessed it,
Yeah.
And I was not bullied, but like I've literally been told that I would traumatize my boys for having them in the birthing room, like,
Yeah.
and by a very close family member,
Yeah.
and was like, no, it's the most
I
natural
would have
thing
been one of those
ever.
people who thought that. I
Right,
totally would have been. So I don't judge people who feel that way because I know I would have been too.
right, but
It's just fear of what we don't know. It's not
exactly.
it's just
And
a
I
lack of
listen,
understanding.
they
That's all it
weren't
is.
they weren't in for both births. They weren't in like when baby came out because things got a little loud, like I said, and like it got intense. So but they were in the next room. They still heard me. And then
Right.
like moments later, they came in. And like Dylan, I remember for Jenna, Dylan was like helping my doula like rub my back. And then you've seen pictures of Jenna like all up in me, like
Yeah.
with that. And it's just like it's if you normalize it at that age, then like they'll grow up and know that it isn't a medical event. And then there'll be the fathers that we talk about, right? Like that partner
Mm.
on Team Mom and advocating for them and not being the reason that their wives don't have the home birth that they
Right.
want and things
Right.
like that. So
Totally.
I know this episode went like 15 different ways, but I
You
think
know?
it's really I think it's really good
Typical.
stuff. Like this is real. Like we're not here like astute professionals talking about, a topic and so formal. Like I think this is the kind of conversation that we need to have sometimes because it's
Well,
it's real.
no, 1,000,000%. And I just think about like the contrast even between our views, right? Or like behind us,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I'm like all like, mm-hmm. Because I have teenagers. I have, whatever. Your background is you have four children under the age of 7.
Yes, and that's two of my children's dresser, which is why it's all the way up there. They have a room. Jenna has a room upstairs, but all of their clothes are somehow in here because they sleep here. And then
Yeah.
this is a whole box of crystals
Nice.
that I moved a year ago. I'm back here a year from Florida, and I
Right.
haven't taken them out of the box. So I took them out of the box, and like I'm trying to sell them because I'm like I feel like they're like my pets. Like I'm not giving them
The love
the
that they need.
experience and the love because quite frankly I have 4 kids under 7 and I don't want to put them out the way I
Right.
used to because I
Right.
don't want them to break.
Right. No, totally.
In Florida we have this big like I don't know what to call it, like shelving built in kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
so they all had spaces where like the kids couldn't touch them, and I don't
Yeah.
have anything that like that here.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, that's the mess of my life right
Yeah. But I mean, I mean, it's just real life and
now. It
it's,
is.
and I think we've had this conversation a little bit of like, I tend to still be that perfectionist and I like Mel Robbins' book, if you haven't listened to it, Let Them is helping me tremendously.
Yeah, I
I'm
sent
like,
you that meme the other day. I was like,
yeah, it
you
was
just,
perfect. It was perfect.
uh,
Anyways,
yeah.
well, hey, listen, if you're still with us and all of our ramblings today, thank you so much. We genuinely appreciate it. Our goal is to help everyone, help folks just have a better experience for both and birth and postpartum. And we know that it's possible through support and engagement and love and information.
And the
So,
village.
and the village for
Yeah.
sure. So we thank you for joining us today, y'all, and we look forward to having you join us again.